So this lecture is about humans being dogs' best friend and about our relationship and where it might be headed. So for this, if you've decided to follow along with the Genius of Dogs, Chapter 11 is going to be most relevant here. And for Cognition, probably things like the empathy game would be interesting here, but all of the games will be interested, so I don't have anything particularly highlighted. So cross-culturally, I think it's hard for many people in the United States or even Europe to understand that still, I think in the majority of countries, dogs are seen as pests. They are not necessarily brought into people's families as we do in the United States in many cases today. It is not necessarily the case that in every culture dogs are beloved. If anything, they are seen as animals that cause problems or even for religious reasons are disgusting. So really, what's going on in the United States or in many European countries or even in Japan or other industrialized nations where dogs have become part of the family or sleeping in people's beds, that is a very new phenomenon and really is the outlier in terms of the relationship that most people have had historically and prehistorically with dogs and the relationship that most people have still today with dogs. I think at the height of that is, and what many people in the United States might find disgusting, is the fact that dogs are still being bought and sold as food. In many cultures, dogs are still thought to be ethically or for any reason a totally acceptable animal to eat. And while I think many people in the United States or most people in the United States would think that was absolutely revolting, obviously there are many places where dogs are not being treated as if they were potential family members. Here in the United States, given the fact that we still have puppy mills where dogs are being bred at incredibly dangerous rates for the mother, for the dogs that are being bred, who aren't necessarily getting the right veterinary care, for the puppies of those females that are just being sold and being kept in tiny little cages, not being appropriately socialized, and then those puppy mills are, when they're inspected, not necessarily being inspected in the most rigorous way. That's happening in our country, along with the shelter problem that we have, where we have so many strays that still go to shelters. Although we've had tremendous improvement there, if you look over many decades, we still have a big problem with dogs that are stray. Many dogs, especially in the northern part of the United States, die every winter if they're not taken to shelters. And so southern shelters in the southern part of the United States, because dogs do survive, they fill up at a much higher rate. And so it's a very difficult problem, even in our own country, where dogs, not all dogs, are being treated the way that anyone who has had a dog in the family would hope that dogs would experience. So it's not just different cultures or different countries, it's also in our own backyard where dogs, let's hope we can have an even better relationship and find solutions to these problems about our relationship with dogs. They certainly are our best friend. Let's hope that we can be their best friend too, even more in the future. Well, there is hope, because even in places where you might think people are not nice to dogs, there's tremendous increase in interest in dogs as pets or as family members. In developing countries, especially the BRIC nations, there's been a steep increase in interest in having dogs as pets, and also just in terms of interest in wildlife and in environmental interest in general. So I think it's going to be interesting to watch over the next few decades as other cultures become interested in dogs the same way that Western culture have been interested in, and many Eastern cultures too have been interested in for a long time. Of course, many of the original breeds were bred not just in the West, but also in the East as well. So it's going to be very interesting to see as time goes on, the relationship of dogs, not just in this country, but worldwide, what happens. So the reason that there is, I imagine that there's a lot of room for hope is because dogs can have a big impact on our relationship with others. So just as one fun example, there was a study done where a young man was sent out into a park, and he was told to get as many telephone numbers of young ladies that he could possibly get. And there were two conditions in the experiment. One condition was he went out into the park, he introduced himself and said, hello, I would love to meet you after coffee. Can I have your telephone number? And the other condition was he did the exact same thing, except for he had a dog with him. And what happened was his chance of getting the phone number, it went from 1 in 10 to 1 in 3 if he had a dog with him. So I imagine, just as a funny example of how dogs can have a big impact on our worldview, but also on our relationships, that I think dogs are going to increasingly be recognized as our best friends, and hopefully we will reciprocate that back to them as well. And as a final example, people, when you are photographed with a dog, are much more likely to have positive feelings towards you than if you're photographed without a dog. And so I think that there's many examples where when people have dogs in their life, people who see other people with dogs see those people as being trustworthy and very social, affable people. I think it's based on probably some real world experience that dogs help people to be those things in some cases. And so I think there'll be a bright future for dogs in the future, in hopefully lots of different countries and lots of different cultures. So in summary, our relationship with dogs could be better. In many cultures, dogs are a pest or even prey. Some dog breeds were initially bred to be eaten, but today in developing countries, that practice is leading to terrible welfare still today. But I think in many cases in those countries now, dogs are being recognized increasingly as a potential family member. And attitudes are rapidly changing in these developing economies. Dogs obviously have a very positive effect on our social lives, and in some surprising ways. So my hope is that whether we're talking about cross-culturally or in different countries or in our own country where we have puppy mills and still have a very serious shelter problem, that we will see a major improvement in the relationship we have with dogs, and that we can be even better to dogs than we are today, especially as we learn more about how their minds operate and the different cognitive profiles that make each dog an individual and make them so special as part of our lives.